Hi everyone, welcome to today's video, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. So in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what I do and kind of why I do it. So one of the main things that I do is removing entity attachments from people or spirit attachments. Some people refer to this as possession, but that's not quite as intense as you would imagine. So, like, it's not really like the movies as much. The movies are more like an exaggeration as far as possession goes, but so what I do is sort of remove these interfering spirits that are either following someone around or have become sort of embedded in their energy field, or sort of like the energy of the body, so that it's become more difficult for them to function. And typically by the time I see people, there's been some kind of physical manifestation of the issue, whether it's like a pain in a certain area, or they just can't really like sleep anymore, so something like this, where it's become like too big of an issue to ignore. And the reason I do this and remove these things from people is it's because it's something that I've struggled with my entire life as far as the attachments. So growing up, I had my first attachment around the age of 7-ish. And this I found out when I got them removed, because I wasn't really aware of it for most of my life. Well, I guess at this point, it is most of my life. I have been aware of it, but at the time I wasn't aware of it. So they said it was just like a lost little boy that got attached at 7, and there were a couple more other ones. I'm not sure exactly when 2 of them attached, but I know one of them attached in a moment of trauma in high school. So that's sort of what can happen, is they can attach in a moment of trauma, and then there's usually some kind of indication that a child does have an attachment, whether it's like an obsession with horror movies. For me, it was never horror movies. I didn't like horror movies. The things that, well, I did have a strange sort of interest in watching SVU, so that's the Special Victims Unit in Law and Order, which, like, I'm not really sure why someone would enjoy watching that like on repeat all day, but that's what I like to do as a kid. Now I don't really like watching stuff like that anymore. It's just like too dark, but once in a while I guess it can be interesting, but I don't watch it like that anymore. So once I got these things removed, then it sort of became this so far lifelong journey of trying to stay sort of abreast the attachments, fighting them off, protecting, defending, because when it's something you have to deal with every single day, you sort of naturally start to become better at it over time. So were there any signs that this is something I would end up doing? Not that I can remember. Although my mother did say, so right after I was born, she had lost her dad like maybe a year or 2 before I was born. So right after I was born, she was like holding me in a rocking chair, and then she said that she like maybe fell asleep during a nap, but then she had a sense of like something like dark and evil at the doorway, and she couldn't turn her head to look at it, but she felt this like sense of terror, and that it was sort of the most intense kind of fear that she's felt. And then eventually she was able to kind of like snap out of it and come, back into kind of reality. But I mean, and this is not a person with a good memory, so the fact that she remembered that from all those years ago, now that obviously I'm much older than a baby, definitely means it definitely left a mark on her. So I guess that was sort of like the only indication that was part of my purpose, was her being approached by that, when I guess almost like the dark spirits welcoming me into reality, or trying to get rid of me, who knows. But that was, I guess, kind of looking back, was the only thing that would really have stood out. I mean, I guess there were other things that made me seem sort of like odd or different, but nothing that I can specifically provide evidence for. I guess some of it was like I would have these kind of weird names for, I had a bunch of like toy horses that I would play with, and I had all these names for them that was like, I can't even remember. I'd have to ask my aunt. She's the only one that can remember when I named them, but they were all these like super long, like Indian sounding names, not like India, but Indian Native American. And they all thought it was like so funny. I'm not really sure if they knew that it was like Native American sounding, being that we were living in Turkey at the time. But it's, yeah, so that's some other weird things. And then there's also this one time where I became obsessed with finding 4-leaf clovers. So one day I was like, my mom, this was when I was like, I think like 4. I just distinctly remember it happening. It was either 4 or 5. So walking down the street, I like ripped my hand away from my mom and just like sprint across the street. I didn't look both ways or anything, which was pretty dumb, but I just ran over, and there was this flower pot, like one of those container pots you find on in a sidewalk. So I look over, and there's just one single 4-leaf clover growing in the pot. So I pull it out, and I was like, Mom, I found it. And she's just like, why the hell did you run across the street like that? You could have got hit by a car. And I almost did get hit by a car, but I guess they saw me in time. So my aunt then pressed the 4-leaf clover in a book, and then it disappeared, which I think I've heard tends to happen with the 4-leaf clovers, is once you find one, they just sort of disappear. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience, but definitely let me know if you have. So those are just some of the weird things. So it wasn't really so much like, oh, Kelsey has an obsession with dark spirits. It was more like, oh, okay, so she just seems like a little bit strange, or just like different. And then, growing up with all the attachments, I was always like tired. I started feeling depressed maybe in like middle school, but it wasn't like, I thought it was just a natural consequence of my circumstances at the time, but looking back, it was definitely the attachments and how incredibly drained I felt by them, and how kind of angry and upset they were. So obviously since then I've had countless attachments, but it's become less of an issue over time as I've learned better and better protection methods, deflection, removal. So it was sort of something that was forced on me. I didn't want to have to do it. Who would want to do that? It's like, oh, and then my biggest fear was like, oh, what if I can't figure out how to remove one, and then I don't know who to see for help anymore. So, yeah, that's another reason why, like, I gave someone a reading once, and this was someone, like, I knew, so it wasn't, like, a random person, and they're like, oh, well, how do I, if you can't answer these specific questions, then I'll know you're talking to Satan. And I'm like, me talking to Satan? Seriously? Do you not know what I deal with every day? I think I would know, But that's another reason I don't give readings anymore as far as like mediumship, because it's just annoying to have to deal with that level of, I wouldn't even call that skepticism. That just feels like a lack of, it's almost like denial, not wanting to integrate it. It was just really frustrating, and at that point I was like, okay, I don't care what spirits come to me from the other side, I am not passing on any more messages. Just a notice to everyone who's listening, I'm not doing that. Don't even bother. So, so after I did that, I realized I'm not really like doing this for people. I'm not really like someone who's going to sit there and make people feel better about their loss. I'd rather just like deal with the current situation and helping people move out of their attachments. So that's sort of what it ended up evolving into as far as what I feel like my biggest purpose is. So with that, that sort of seems to be what happens. So the people that come to see me with these attachments, it's not typically like the things that I think you would normally see on a person. So it's not like, because a lot of people do have attachments, but it's not like super dark things. It's just like deceased humans mostly are probably the biggest kinds of attachments. And then, as someone who's had tons of them, they're almost always human. But as I got deeper and deeper into the work, it started to become non-human things. So there's the gray aliens, which are the ones known for abducting people. They can also, after they die, become attached to people. There's what I call the archons, I guess it's kind of a goofy name for them, but I read something on a website about them, and I was like, okay, so people have encountered this type of being, I guess I'll just call it that, which is like kind of like a dark, fear-based alien. They usually appear on people as like a dark, like almost like an eel. They look like a dark eel. Yeah, it's not as common to see them out like attached, I say, in the wild, like a Pokemon, but they do tend to attach to people, and they mostly feed off of fear. They can also feed off of like sexual energy, not to say people who are sexual, but more just like the energy of sexual abuse is something they also are very drawn to, but predominantly fear is the energy that they would feed on. So some signs and symptoms of archon attachments is from what I've noticed, an obsession with horror movies to the point where they're almost like comforting for you, especially ones about like possession or demons or suicide, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that excuse me, the archons will be sort of drawn to. Another sign of an archon could be that you feel like you sort of attract cult-like people or situations in general. Any kind of like prolonged sexual or ritualized abuse is something else that they're drawn to, which is probably not super common, but that's the type of energy where it's like, okay, this person, any kind of ritualized abuse, there's going to be archons involved pretty much all the time, I would say. But anyway, so as far as my point being is those are the beings that I see most often now. So it does feel like that is part of my purpose, is just like dealing with the archons. Because it's funny, because I'm not like, oh my god, I'm so scared, like it's an archon. It's almost like, oh yay, finally, like a challenge. After doing this for so long, it's like I'm constantly being shown stronger and stronger beings. So but that's sort of how I got to that point. So I hope that was interesting or made sense. Feel free to ask any questions below, and I will see you next time. Bye.